Okay, we're live. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you,
I
Connor.
will, yeah, I'll give you the floor. Why don't you introduce yourself, maybe a high level overview of your background, and then what you're building with SyncLodge.
Okay. Well, my name's Lionel Lodge. I am currently the CEO of SyncLodge. We can get into that. I've worked all my life in the entertainment industry. My father was in it, and over the years, I started as a performer, songwriter, singer, musician, bands touring, signed to record labels, and that sort of thing. We played thousands of shows in many countries and all that. And along the way, I would see a distinct sort of crack in the way things were working as something that just wasn't quite right. And then I would set myself to actually seeing if I could fix it. And my very first company was in my early 20s, my real company. And then in the 90s, I founded and exited a couple companies in the UK. I sound like I'm from the North America, but I'm actually British, but I grew up in Canada. So anybody wondering about my accent. And it's all my businesses have been focused on the music side of the entertainment industry. And with SyncLodge, we're actually bridging the music and the visual production side. So we focus on something that's called sync licensing, which is the legal usage of music and visual content, with like TV, films, video games, advertising. And there's a whole very complicated process that goes along with that. So anytime you're watching a film or a TV show, and there's music in it, that music has been licensed. And there's people that own the song and people that own the recording. And those people have been negotiated with, and they've signed contracts, and there's been a license fee paid, and then the music is allowed to be used. And so what we've built is, we like to refer to it as the road. So it's the system for everybody to work on. It has portals for every stakeholder in the industry, and they can all work together inside the system. And we don't really focus on, if I use the analogy of the road, what kind of car you're driving or what you're carrying in the truck or anything like that. It's just, we are the road to get you from point A to point B and then back again. And so we have quite a few different elements to the system, and it's quite a bit of a complicated process, sync licensing. We have won, I think it's 4 innovation awards this year. We're nominated for another 3 next year. And so we seem to be doing quite well. We're globally focused. I think it's in 27 countries we're in right now. And we launched in April 22, so we're building quite quickly and quite well.
Very nice. No, I think that sets the stage well. I'd like to back up, and you said you've been in the entertainment business your whole life. And if I heard you correctly, were you in a band specifically, or you worked in that space, touring with a band?
No, I've been a player. I started as a player. I started learning piano when I was, I think, 8 or 9, and then moved to the saxophone. My piano player stopped. He just didn't show up one day. My piano teacher, he just, one day, I was weekly lessons. I was learning honky tonk. I was very much into Elton John style piano playing. And then the piano teacher didn't show up one day, so I changed schools to a school that had a music course, and I started learning the saxophone, and then the bass guitar, and then the 6-string guitar. And I played always in bands. Now I have my own bands. I have one here in Vienna, and one in the UK, and one in Canada. And I've recorded and released, I think it's 12 albums. You can find me on Spotify and Apple and all those sort of things. And I'm the only Lionel Lodge in those sectors. So if
It's
you're interested in
all
what kind of music,
all the music is
sorry?
produced under your own name. Sorry, is it, or are you?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Yeah. And
And
the thing with my career is, I never wanted to be famous.
hmm,
So from an early age, I decided that fame was actually a bit of a chain around your neck. I didn't want to be that person everybody pointed at the cafe. I wanted to have my own life. But I wanted to still make music, and I've written hundreds of songs, I've co-written many more. So it wasn't really conscious as much as just a knee-jerk reaction. Most of the times when I would finish a recording, I'd move to another country, which would really diminish the potential of promoting it in the original country. And for me, it was an exploration. It was, going somewhere else and putting another band together and writing songs for that band and, doing live shows. I played thousands of shows in many, many countries, and having it so that it was exploration, a creative exploration. And it's something that I also really like about business. There's a lot of creativity in business, and a lot of times it's an exploration. If you are going into a sector of an industry that is new for that industry, if you're doing
Hmm.
something that's new, then there's quite a creative process to it, and I've done that a few times. And climb my philosophy on people say it's a mountain to climb, and I feel that if you're going to climb a mountain, why climb a small one? Pick a big one and really climb it. When you get to the top, you feel like you've accomplished something.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we can go into that more, but I think first I'm kind of curious. Um, would you say that you're naturally musically inclined? Did you have parents that played instruments and that's why you picked it up, or what pushed you towards music?
Well, my dad was in the music industry as a DJ. So in the 1960s, there was something called Radio Caroline in the UK that basically kick-started the British invasion. And he was program director of Radio Caroline and head DJ. And he was interviewing the Beatles, touring with the Who, with the Kinks, with the emceeing the Rolling Stones, this sort of thing. And so it was in the forefront of my world. And he brought home DJ copies of great albums before they were released. So all the top,
Mm.
legacy artists of the time, we would have it in our house before it was on the radio or anything. And it just, from a very, very early age, it just attracted me. I just loved it so much. So the thing I always wanted to be was a singer. And so that's my main instrument. And I've enjoyed it very much. And it's very self-indulgent of me.
Hmm.
I do it for the enjoyment of it and hope that other people enjoy it too. But first is I'm liking it.
Yeah. Can you say that anyone can learn music? I think about myself. I remember in school growing up, we'd play the recorder, elementary
Mhm.
school in the United States, and I think at that point I realized that it wasn't for me. So I don't know if you think that's a fair statement. Can anybody become musically talented or an expert at whatever instrument or something they decide,
Yeah,
or are
well,
you more inclined towards that?
I think it's like anything you want to do in your life. If you really want to do it, you can. I've worked with people that just are naturally gifted. There's something called perfect pitch for singers, where they always sing the right note, right? And I have taught singing. I've coached singers in studios, and I still have a couple students here that I teach. I coach once a week. Um, but it can be learned. It definitely can be learned. And if you start out and feeling like you're not so talented that way, I have a hard time with the word talent. It sounds like it's sort of something that you're born with. But most of the people I know have just worked hard at it. There's a quote from Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys when he was called a genius, and he said, "I'm not a genius. I just work very hard."
Hmm.
Right? And I think that the same applies to business. The people that seem to do amazing things in business, if you look behind the scenes, they're working very hard and they're really focused on it. It's what they do every day, and it's not like a side thing and they go home and shut off. They're in the evening time, they're still working on it. And so it's I think anybody can learn, but it depends on how much desire you have to learn.
Yeah, so maybe one more note on this and then we can pivot to other topics. So maybe a young person out there that listens to this that wants to pick up an instrument or develop that music skill, music talent, what do you recommend as a first step? Are there any resources or anything that helped you as you were starting out?
Well, first of all, I would always start out on the piano. Piano is the most logically laid out instrument. It's the white keys are the what they call the there's the flats and the sharps are the black keys. Now I don't even remember what the white keys are called, but they're not the flats or sharps. But it's laid out in a very logical way, so you can just put your hand on it and start finding things. Um, Always good to take lessons. YouTube is full of lessons and coaching and ideas of how to work on things. Nowadays, you also have a lot of technology that makes it very easy. When I
Hmm.
started out, it was a real piano. It wasn't a keyboard. There was no synthesizers when I started out. Okay, that's not true. There's Moog synthesizers, but they were very expensive and great big things. But the piano is always good, and just it depends on what you want to do. If you want to work in a certain type of music, then it's always good to find somebody that is experienced with it. Try to find mentors. Try to find somebody that will give you some teaching. And I generally find that people that are have years of experience in something are very open to sharing, to giving some mentoring, to giving just especially young people that are curious or trying to do it. It's amazing how many people will just say, "Sure, you can jump on a call once a month. I'll give you an hour once a month and give you some mentoring, give you some training."
Hmm. No, that's all good advice. I like it. Maybe we could pivot a little bit to, you mentioned SyncLodge. You mentioned briefly what you do. I'm curious, or just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So it sounds like you provide a platform, or you're the middleman liaison helping that licensing process for
Mhm.
copyrighted music to be used.
Yeah, we are not middlemen. So this is one of the
Okay.
distinct things that we there are services out there where you can put your music on, and they will shop it to for what's called music supervisors that they source and they negotiate and they clear the music for the visual production company, like the producer and the director, say, of the film. And these music supervisors, they're the ones that do a lot of the legwork. They're really the ones that source it and put the ideas together. And there are platforms out there where you can put your music up, and they will deal with the music supervisor or directly with the visual production company and sell you music. Um, my philosophy is it's healthier for the people that create the music or the independent labels and independent publishing companies if they actually build their own networks. So on our system, we are not a middleman. On our system, the music supervisor can search all the world's music that's publicly released. So we don't curate it all. We don't store the music on our system. We access it through APIs. And then also with that, they can access with one click. They can see who all the copyright holders are, who wrote it, who owns the publishing, who owns the recording, and then reach out to them and deal. And they deal directly, right? And so the idea is that the copyright owners, the creators of the music, and the people that administer the music build their own networks, build their own communities. Right? Why do we have to be in between that? We don't. Right? And our business model is so one of the elements that there are a lot of services for sync licensing that charge a monthly fee. Right? And a lot of them promise that they can get you on Netflix, get you on Amazon Prime, because they've done it a few times before and they show you all the shows they got on. But nobody really has that control except for the producers and the directors. So there's a quote from quite a few music supervisors I know that say, I've got this favorite band, and this is the favorite album of mine by them, and I'm waiting for the day I can place a track on it. I put a track in a film. Right? So, agent or service cannot promise that they are going to get you any placements, right? If they have a lot of contacts, then maybe it can happen. Maybe it can happen, right? But they are charging a subscription fee, and this can be. I think we have to be very careful of not to drain the creators and not to make it so that the business model is to get as much as possible out of the people that are making the least money as possible. That's the
Hmm.
best way to put it, right?
Hmm.
So our system, we have no membership fees. We have no sign-up fees. Okay, so it's a little bit like Amazon. I can go onto Amazon as a buyer, and I can look for anything I want. And when I find what I want, I can buy it. And then the sellers are only paying Amazon when they sell something, right?
Hmm.
Right. So I have an account. I have a shop on Amazon, and every time I sell something, Amazon makes money, and that's how we do it. So you register with us as a copyright owner, as a music administrator, record company, publishing company, or as an independent artist. And you tell us who you are. We verify everybody and we find your data. We find your whole catalog. We can show you how it is on the streaming platforms, how it is on other registered databases. And then when a music supervisor is interested, They reach out to you, they negotiate, you say yes, and we get a percentage. And we get a very, very small percentage compared to what a lot of other people charge for these libraries or agents. We charge 2% of the license fee, which is pretty well nothing. So if you get a $10,000 placement, we ask for $200.
Got it. What
Right?
what keeps the transaction within your platform? What prevents a copyright holder and a music supervisor to connect on your platform, but then transact outside of it?
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. So we've built tools that automate many of the administrative work, well, parts of the administrative work mostly for the music supervisor and the visual production company, but also for the copyright holders. So they can, if a music supervisor reaches out to a record label, say, and they reach out through our system, and the record label says, "Hey, Mary, last 2 weeks ago we dealt with something, and we just did it over email. Can't we just do that again?" The music supervisor can go, okay, and export the documents out and send it by an external email to them. But then the music supervisor has a lot more work of keying things in, right? And it is a lot of work to key everything in. And one of our philosophies is also that the data should be input by who it's the most important to. So this means that all the registration information for the copyright holder, music copyright holder, they actually put that in. They put it in once into our system, and then we recognize who they are, and then that is auto-populated in every document, every form that this information is needed. So it speeds it up. It's like we're told that we're saving about 60% of administrative time for music supervisors, and for copyright holders, it just expands the reach of your catalog. So we've verified you. We've said, yes, this person works for this company, or they're an individual and they have the right over this catalog at this time. And then when the music supervisor is considering the music, they search right on the system to see current date, who the owners are, real time who the owners are, right? So if it's changed hands since then the system will tell them. But it makes them feel comfortable of dealing with unknowns. One of the problems is if I'm a music supervisor and I place some music in a film and I've dealt with this person and they tell me that they have the full rights to do it, and then it goes in the film and the drummer of the band is sitting with his girlfriend in the cinema and their song comes on and goes, wait a sec, I wrote the chorus in that. Nobody talked to me. And that person, the drummer gets a lawyer, and the lawyer sues the visual production company. And the visual production company does pay because they're not going to pull the film out of the cinemas to change the song. And the music supervisor doesn't work anymore. Right? There's somebody else on the visual production team that gets fired. People lose their jobs. So they're very cautious about unknowns. Right? And it's a matter of figuring out, okay, is this real? Is this the person I have to deal with? And our system does a lot of that. We have a part of the system called synchronization authority mapping, where we globally map who represents who and who's being represented by who. And this is something that is verified by all the parties involved. And then if they stop working together, they click a button on our system, and then there's not that relationship anymore, and they can assign it to somebody else. So it's a very clean way of doing it. And one of the big problems in the music industry, more so than any other industry, is data. Is clarity and consistency of data. And this is a huge problem. So you have things in the States, there's ASCAP and BMI. These are called performance rights organizations, or PROs. And you also have a thing called Sound Exchange. And then there's also the streaming platforms. And all of these organizations have what they call a black box. And the black box, I think it's a terrible name, because on an airplane, a black box knows everything, right? The airplane goes down, they take out the black box and tells them everything about what happened on the plane. The black box in the music industry is a place where they put the money for revenues collected that they don't know who to pay, right? And a lot of contemporary releases have somewhere between 8 and 12 different writers There's multiple writers on a lot of the contemporary stuff that's being released these days. So each of those would have a publisher, and then there's the record company. So maybe let's round it off. Say there's 10 entities that actually have the rights on this. If one of those entities is not properly registered, the money doesn't flow to anybody. Right? So I could have 1.3% of the publishing on a song, but I've not registered properly. They don't know how to pay me. They don't pay anybody. And each year, like this year now in the UK, there was the black box for one of the PROs, for the PRO in the UK. It's a little over £400 million went in the black box this year. And that's happening on a
Wow.
global level. So Spotify has that. Apple Music has that. Right? Apple Music is probably, I think, one of the best for having clarity. But all these streaming platforms and these collective agencies, they have their black box. And it's a huge amount of money. And that is because the data is not clear, not consistent. And we have actually built tools to make it so. And we're actually now building more. We're having meetings with the World Intellectual Property Organization. Do you know what that is?
No.
No. So it's a UN organization. It's a UN part of the UN, and they, on a global level, they deal with governments. They deal with large organizations on how to actually properly manage intellectual property and how the money should flow, and on legislative levels. This is they're quite high up, and they are very excited about what we're doing and what we have done. And it looks like we're going to be, hopefully, in the new year, building something with them to even clean up the data even more. This is one of our missions, is to make it so that the money flows. And the problem, if I could just say, the problem with the black box money is, after in some territories it's 3 years, in some territories it's 5 years. They have to sit on the money to see if somebody claims it. But if you're an independent band, you don't know the money's there waiting for you. Right? And it's not clear how to claim it. So after the 3 or 5 years, the organization can do what they want with it. So normally what they do is they take most of it and they pay it to Sony, Universal, and Warner, the three big, they call the three majors, three major companies, and they pay it to their top artists. Okay? Now, the problem with that is those guys have their data pretty well locked down, clean, consistent around the world. It's the smaller companies, it's their money, it's the independent artist money that actually is being divided up that way. And so for me, this is quite a problem, and a lot of other people agree with me, that there's something that's being called the silent depression going on right now, where there is an exodus of creators from the industry because they can't make any money in it. Because you're in a band, you're playing gigs, you've recorded a couple albums, you put them out, now it's streaming platforms, you're not making any money there. The gigs are paying less and less, they cost more and more. Your partner wants to have children. You decide, okay, it's time to give up this silliness, and I'm going to get a real job. That's what a lot of people are doing. Right? And the problem with that is we could end up 5-10 years down the road where all the music that is being generated is being the top 10 of the major record labels or AI. And what a horrible world that will be. Right? No
Yeah.
authentic music coming out, nothing, only chasing the top 10 of the charts. And, the art is a communication. And humans are amazingly creative beings. And we need to keep that authentic, real, personal human communication going. And music is one of the greatest communicating platforms. It affects us in so many ways. If we don't support the new generation, then we are heading into a very bad time. And so this is something I'm very passionate about. I fight for this all the time, and it's quite a mountain to climb, but it's a big one, and I like big mountains.
Yeah. No, I can tell. And I just learned something, right? Because, right, I use Spotify, but I don't know the behind the scenes. So can you speak a little more to why smaller artists do not make much money through the streaming platforms? If I think about it, and I think this is similar with podcasts as well. I mean, there's just so many podcasts that exist now. Is it that the marketplace is too crowded? And then, as you mentioned, that kind of compounds if they're not registered correctly and they are receiving streams, but Spotify doesn't know how to pay them. I mean, are those the two core issues, or why
Yeah,
are people struggling?
well, there is that. There is the black box issue and not knowing how to pay. Um, a lot of independent artists go through aggregators like CD Baby or TuneCore, these companies that you load your music up into them and they distribute it to all the streaming platforms. Okay. Now, some of these aggregators are very good at it. Some of them are very bad with the data, and we have seen through our system where instead of the record label name, the artist name is there, and then okay, that's not entity to pay. It's Johnny and the blah 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 band, right? And so those people don't get paid. It's also Spotify is now saying that if you're under, I think it's 1,000 plays per month, they don't pay you anything. And but the other side of it is the way Spotify works is they say, okay, over this time period, we've collected this much money, and then we've had these many streams. So that divides up to, for when we take our share out, that divides up to this much money per stream. And it's somewhere around now, somebody might want to correct me on this, but it's somewhere around 0.00003 cents. 0.00003 cents per stream. Now, don't quote me on that because I
Yeah.
get all those zeros a little confused. But it's really a very, very small amount. So you're only going to make money if you're doing tens of millions of streams. If you're doing in the millions, then okay. If you're only doing a few million, it's still not that much money, right? Now, back in the days of vinyl and CDs, okay, vinyl is coming back, but it's a very different thing. I could do a show and I could sell 50 CDs for 20 euros each. That's €1,000, right? Right now, if I have 1,000 streams, right, it's nothing. It's pennies, and that is the difference, right? And so there's been times where at the end of a gig, there's a table set up with all my CDs, and there's people around it, and I go over there and talk to them, and they say, "Oh, I really like those songs that you played from this CD. That was really good. So is this on Spotify?" Yeah. Okay, I'll listen to it there.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens too much, then how do you afford to record? Right? It's a hobby then, and you can't say, okay, if I record with when it was physical sales. If I record, then I need to sell 300 of these to pay for the recording costs. Okay, that's doable, right? Then the rest I can profit and split with the band and all that sort of thing. With streaming, you have no idea because they don't tell you until the end of the period what each stream is worth because they don't know how much money they've collected compared to how many streams. So they can't tell you until the end of the period. So you can't bank on it. You can't say, okay, let's put the money together and go into the studio and record and do this and then put it up on streaming platforms. And the other side of it is that artists generally they want to share their music. They want to have feedback. They want to have a reaction, and this is a big part of it for them. And so a lot of times they're willing to compromise the money. A lot of times, especially at first, they're willing to say, okay, let's get it out and see if people like it. Oh, people are liking it. I'm getting good comments. This feels good. Right? And you can only do that for so long before you start realizing, yeah, it feels good, but I'm not making any money. And I know hundreds and hundreds of artists that are really exceptional that have never really made any money out of their music.
What's the solution? I know you mentioned working with the intellectual property organization with the UN. So a lot of efforts on your part. I mean, are there other pieces when you think about it from your company's perspective, from your background in music? What's the solution? Where do we go?
Well, one of the beauties of why we're focused on sync licensing, one of the beauties of sync licensing is so another quote from music supervisors, and I've heard this a few times when they're asked, how do I produce or write for sync licensing to get my music placed in film or TV? And the answer is don't. Don't write or produce for sync licensing. Write your own thing. Authenticity is what it's all about. Right? Write your song. Right? Produce your music the way you like it. Right? And when it's authentic, then that really works. So the beauty of it is there's no, it's got nothing to do with the top 10 or the trends. It's the widest spectrum of music possible works with sync licensing. Depending on the film, depending on the TV show, depending on the scene, right? The video game, the advertisement. It's like everybody's talking about diversity these days. This is the most diverse sector of any industry. Right? You can make music in your bedroom while hitting on your bedposts and singing some weird thing and having your friends chant in the background. You could do whatever you want like that, and that could work with sync licensing. So we focused on that to really give an empowerment to the creators to say, look, this is there. This is a real thing that when you finish your music from what you want to make, you can actually access this part of the industry and actually make some good money out of it. And the other, so there's the license, then there's the broadcast royalties. If it's in a film, there's broadcast TV, very good broadcast royalties. Advertising, very good broadcast royalties. So what happens is after it's played, the performance rights organization collects the money for you. If you're properly registered there, then it sends it over to you. Sometimes it takes up to a year for it to get to you, but it can be a very nice amount of money. And so there is that. And also, it's a great marketing leverage tool. So I don't know if you followed this, but I think it was last year, Kate Bush, who was huge in her time, huge artist in her time. And then, new generations weren't so interested. Other artists were there and they're getting their attention. And Kate Bush really wasn't that well known. There was a TV show called Stranger Things on Netflix. And they put a Kate Bush song in it. And Kate Bush was stunningly talented. Right? She had beautiful music. And it just went like crazy, like tens and tens of millions of streams on Spotify and Apple Music. It just went like she had the number one song on Spotify, number one song on Apple Music, like out of nowhere. Like the marketing department didn't do anything for that. They just got this placement. Right? And the leverage power of it is great. So for younger bands, it's a very cool thing. If you get a cool placement, you get a few of them. People Shazam it. Okay, that's that. Okay, then they go and find it on Spotify or wherever they stream their music from. And this has a real effect, right? It doesn't happen every time, but it definitely has a real effect. So it's having the ability to dream, I think, is very important for humankind. I think as soon as we take away those dreams, especially in the creative sectors, we're going in a very, very dangerous direction. And so that's one of my it's the lusts of my work, is to share that and say, look, you can create whatever you want. And there's the opportunity there. And as long as you go through these steps, I teach at some very recognized music educational institutes, and in the States, in Canada, and the UK, here in Europe. And I do workshops on the structure and mechanics of the music industry and the structure of the revenue flows. And one of the things is I teach preparation and then execution. Everything I focus on is divided up into those two things. Before you start to do the work, make sure you've done the preparation. Before you start thinking about the roof, build the foundation for the house. Put the foundation in. Make sure it's strong. Make sure it's sitting there so you can build on top of it. Right? And this is something that is with SyncLodge, we have had artists sign up with us, and we ask them, what is your PRO? What is what's called the IPI number, which is an international recognition number for that individual, whether it's a publishing company or a songwriter. And they say, what is that? We've had this where they say, well, what do you mean PRO? And what's an IPI number? Okay, if you don't know that, then don't go for sync. Do that first. It's like getting a job at your favorite company, and they telling you that you need a bank account so they can pay you, but you just don't bother opening the bank account. It's too much work. I got to go fill out forms at the bank, and I'm not going to do that. I just want to work at this place. And then 3 months later, you're telling your friends how there's no money in this work, right? Because you haven't told the system how to pay you. Right?
Yeah. I want to back up. You mentioned it's really important for humans to dream. You mentioned AI or just small artists potentially going away, a threat to the industry. I mean, does that keep you up at night? Is that kind of your biggest concern? And what are your general thoughts about AI produced music? I think it's interesting. I think there's a piece of it where people always seek out things created by other people because we understand the work, or we're kind of in awe of what it takes to create something like that. I don't know if you share that thought, or if you think AI is just this huge threat and it's 10 years from now, people are just going to be consuming music made by an AI. What's your general take there?
Well, the music industry, the music itself and the music industry has always been a tech industry from the very, very beginning. The first instrument, that was new technology. The piano was one of the most innovative pieces of technology of its time. Like, it was an amazing thing that somebody, I don't know who designed the first one. But, and so it's always been this way. And if you look at the analogy of the piano, when the piano came out, it made it so the level of what was acceptable as great music went up. Right? You could actually play it on a piano and it was all in tune, and it was like this amazing thing with those 88 keys, right? Like, you had this, so people could really make music that nobody had heard before. But the other thing about that is it built barriers for people that couldn't afford to have a piano or didn't have access to a piano. Right? So it left some behind because of that. Right? So there's always this thing in the music industry, new technology, and then the people that couldn't access the piano, eventually it builds up where they can. Now it's pretty easy to access a piano. Here in Vienna, there's pianos in many cafes, and if you go in there and you have decent, they'll just let you play it. Right? So this is. But with AI, it's a very interesting time. It's a very interesting thing, and what is going to happen with AI. It can be used like this. Right now. There's a lot of tools that just they're helping for the producer. They're helping for the writer. Right? They're sort of like sometimes they're used as co-writers. Sometimes it's like, okay, here's the chords I'm playing in this song, and I need a bass line to go along with it. And I think the bass line should be this sort of bass line. And the AI can produce that sort of bass line. Okay, that's interesting. One of my things I like to say is, as soon as you put interesting next to a creative art form, that usually is a negative, because you are using your left brain and not your right brain. Oh, that's an interesting song you wrote. It's not that I love it. It's my left brain is thinking, that's an interesting thing. How did you do that? And boy, that's clever. Artistic expression there's a cleverness to it, but there's more an emotion side to it. Right? So I think AI is going to come, and it's coming. It's here already, and there are AI composed and produced songs, and this is going to happen more and more. And this is going to be something that, okay, will people really care? You're sitting somewhere, there's music in the background. Would they care if it's AI made the voice and made the whole thing, and it's not anybody human on it? Some people won't, but then some people, there is that human element to it that is obviously missing. That human, je ne sais quoi. How do you put your finger on it? But this human communication, right? This human, like when you look at a beautiful painting, a work of art, there's something human in it that's speaking to you. If it's just an AI making it, there seems that's Also, I think about back in the 70s when I was 15 years old in 1977 when punk rock really came out, right? The birth of punk rock music, right? And punk rock was the reaction to bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer that were hugely talented musicians doing overly complicated music that was all for the intellectual side of, look how amazing we are. We are like Mozart and Beethoven playing, some sort of rock version of it. And as a kid, I thought it was really boring. As a kid, I didn't like that stuff at all, right? I liked the stuff that was really gritty and more kick-ass. And then when punk music came out in 77, that was because people were frustrated with, there's a classic thing of Johnny Rotten walking into a fashion store in London, and he had a Pink Floyd t-shirt, and in it just said Pink Floyd, and he wrote above it, "I hate." Right? And that was the attitude. This huge, overbloated corporate, let's get back to the grassroots. They weren't nearly as good musicians. So, boy, you go into a sweaty little club with a punk rock band playing and you jump up and down a lot. It sure felt good, right? It felt a lot better than sitting and going in awe at Emerson, Lake and Palmer or Yes playing their over-orchestrated stuff. And nothing against Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Yes fans, but it just didn't, for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, it just didn't kick them as much. And I think that will happen with AI. I think it will come around to the point, everything goes in waves, right? Mm-hmm. And it's got to get up to that top point, and then it'll start coming back down again. And hopefully we don't get we don't lose too many creators in the industry because of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like with Chat GPT comes out, and I mean that's available to anybody. It has so many use cases, and you play around with it, and you say, "Oh, that's neat. It wrote me an article about American history in 10 seconds," but then you kind of move on. You're not that impressed
Yeah,
because there's no human behind it. So I think it's a really
yeah.
interesting
I, I,
point.
ha- I
And
had a thing with GPT where I get interviewed quite a bit for business magazines, and they send me these questions. And after I'd been published in like 10 this year, another one came in, and I thought, what happens if I put up all these interviews that I've already done into GPT and then give them the new questions and ask it to take my answers from the other ones and write just new versions, with my attitudes, because basically a lot of the questions are similar and there's quite the same. And so it wrote the answers to all these questions, and I put it to my team. And one thing with SyncLodge is we share everything. So it doesn't matter what sector of the company you work in, you can have say on anything. Everything is shared, everything's on the table. And if you think that's a stupid idea and you've got nothing to do with that sector of the company, it's very welcome that you say, as long as you say why you think it is. So I put this article up there and say, so what do you think? Because all the articles I put up for my answers, I put up for the team to yay or nay on, or adjust things if they want. And the first reaction was, sounds like you, pardon my language, but this is what the person said. It sounds like you're a corporate asshole, Lionel. Like, what happened to Lionel? Like this, it sounds like it was written by AI. And so I said, bingo. Right? It was written by AI, and nobody liked it in the team. Nobody liked it, right? It was just like this sort of thing. No, don't do that. Right? It was a funny experiment that they really clocked it. Right? So it still has a ways to go. But
yeah, I think that comes back to, I
but
mean, right now we're having a conversation. I think it needs to be organic and authentic. You can't come in and just speak like a robot. I'm going to hit these 5 points and
yeah.
that's it. That's the end of the interview. So,
Yeah, well,
um,
somebody's building for us, AI me, right, to answer questions on SyncLodge. So it will, when it gets finished, you'll be able to click on the corner of the screen and speak into your microphone of your computer and say, "So how do I do this?" And it would look like me talking in every language of the world, right? So
wow.
I look like I'm talking Japanese. My mouth would move with the movement of Japanese, and but it is a set of answers to a set of questions, right? And the more it gets asked, if we have to train it,
Yeah.
right? It's not just thinking for itself. It's not like it's looked through our our whole system and figured out, okay, this is how this works. Now I can answer any question about it. No, we have to tell it to, right? But it is. It's a really interesting time, though. It's a really interesting thing, the experiment in a way that humans are doing.
Yeah. And do you think about it? I was really young when the internet came out, but it seems like when these new revolutionary technologies come out, we don't know how to deal with them. And I remember when I was a little kid, or as I was growing up, there were people that said, "Oh, the internet is a fad. It's going away, whatever." And I
Why do
think,
I need email? What's
yeah,
this email? Why do I need that? Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
AI seems similar, or we're just so naive to it, or we just don't know where it's going. And so I think you just have to keep rolling with it, and it will become clear with
Yeah.
time, right?
Well, there is, I think on most, like on Zoom and a lot of these talk things, maybe on your system, there's an AI. There's definitely on Zoom and a lot of those systems of video meeting. There's AI involved to cut out background noise, to clarify the voice, right?
hmm
And it just listens and it just quantifies what the voice is and gets rid of as much as it can of the background noise, right? This is an AI system. And we use AI, the phrase of it, as some sort of, you know, a super intelligent computer system that's watching and thinking. But we've been using basically artificial intelligence in computer systems for a long time, right? It's just now coming up to being, our computing capabilities are stronger now, right? We have computers that can handle millions of processes at the same time. We have computer systems that can actually do that. But the majority of AI is going into things that you won't even know it's there, right? Into industry, into office work, into just making things streamlined, into just making things more intelligent, just to, in your car, I see it where you have an AI system that actually monitors everything in your car and tells you the rear axle bearings are going to be going in 10,000 miles. So you have to get that looked at. Just things like that. They just help us understand and be more aware of what we're doing. There is an element in the creative industries where it's kind of scary for people, though.
Yeah, I understood. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The Writers Guild of America, they were on strike earlier this year, and
Yeah.
one of the things is how are we going to be protected by AI writing scripts, right? And like my example of the interview answers, it's still a long ways to go on that. Right? It's still a long ways to go. And then there's the other side, and they're dealing with this in music, of who actually owns it then. If I've taken 5,000 scripts and fed it into an AI system and asked it to write the script variants of this book, right? Okay, here's the book. There's 5,000 script examples. Write it. The person that wrote the AI program doesn't own that, right? The company that actually is managing the AI system, they don't own that. You cannot, it's the 5,000 scripts. Those writers actually legally own that. Right? This is what's going on right now. And in music, they're debating it as well, right? This is the thing. You cannot take away, it's plagiarism, a form of plagiarism. You cannot just take somebody else's thing and then, if I was to look at somebody's script and then rewrite it and write my script sort of like theirs, but, plagiarize it, or songwriting and plagiarize it. AI is going through the same thing. The only problem is the people that are programming and teaching the AI. At first, maybe they're starting to do it now, but at first they were not logging what the AI was taught on. So in music, it's like 5 million tracks will get dumped into an AI system with metadata that says this song is this, that song is this, right? That's what a clarinet sounds like. That's what drums sound, electric guitar, this is what, and putting this stuff in, but it's like 5 million tracks go into it. It spits out a song. Who owns that? And if you haven't logged what music is being inspired or the AI is being programmed by, then it basically has to be all 5 million. And if there's an average of 10 copyright holders for each recording, then that's 50 million entities on this one recording. And if that one recording makes $1 million, everybody gets 20 cents.
5 cents? 20 cents? Yeah.
20 cents, right?
20 cents.
Everybody gets 20 cents. So it's like, that won't work, right? That will just not work. So these are the problems that the AI is having on the business side. I think we'll sort it out, and I think it's going to be an interesting thing. We have things called DAWs or DAWs, digital audio workstations, and you can work on your computer. There's Pro Tools, there's Logic, there's quite a few. And instead of going into a recording studio, I can have a laptop and plug in a USB port and record. Right? That changed the music industry as soon as we had that. Right? So instead of an average of 30,000 releases a year, we're now having somewhere between 120 and 150,000 releases a day. Right? That's on Spotify. Right? These are the numbers. Right? And it used to be around 30,000 a year. Right? So that's a huge difference. But I've been thinking about this. I was thinking about this the other day about what is important. What is important in all of this? We have to make sure creatives have a way of earning money, but we put this business around it. And I think the most important thing is that people are creative. I think it is an essential thing for our beings to be creative, to have a creative outlet, to be able to do something from our imagination, whether there's tools or not helping us. We used to build a house with a chisel and a hammer and rough stones and make square stones and build a house slowly out of that, right? Now we pour cement, okay? Right? A lot easier, a lot quicker, okay? So we have tools that can help us, but we still need this creativity. And I think that is the main thing for humankind. That if we remove that, then we have depression. Then we have people just doing a job and there's no lust for life. Right? And as Iggy Pop wrote quite wonderfully back in 1977. Yes, having a lust for life is very important.
So is that at the core, you running SyncLodge, is that at the core of what you're doing? And maybe we can kind of shift to what you're building there. You mentioned if you're going to climb a mountain, it might as well be a big mountain.
Yeah.
So is that what drives you? And then what mountain are you trying to climb as you look to the future with SyncLodge?
Okay. So there's all with any business, you would hope there's two sides to it. And one is the passion for what the business is going to do. Hopefully, it's going to have a positive effect on humankind. And there's a passion for doing something positive in the world. Right? The other side is also making money. Right? Money isn't an evil thing. Money is a great thing. It gives freedom. Right? You can do a lot. If you have a lot of money, you can do a lot of wonderful things. And I'm not just talking about buying yachts, but I'm talking about helping other people, helping communities. I know people with quite a bit of money that have, they built schools, they built orphanages, they built daycare centers, they built things like this, right? When you have a lot of money, you can do great things like that. With SyncLodge, the initial inspiration was these are creative people working on as the music supervisors. That was the first thing that I saw, and they're not getting paid a lot, and they're overburdened with administrative work. And why are they doing it that way? We're in the 21st century. That doesn't make any sense to me. This is not the 1980s anymore. Why are they doing it that way? And because there was no tools for them to actually do it in a way that makes it so they're not overburdened with administrative work. And they're creative people. So that was part of it. And the other part was access for the new generation of artists and the independent labels and record companies and publishing companies have access to that market. And then, as I said, there is a problem with data, and it's a serious problem with data. Right? It is. I was explaining it to a friend of mine that works in the finance industry, and he said, "Well, if the finance industry had that kind of problems with data, the world would be bankrupt. Money just wouldn't flow. Right? There wouldn't be any goods in the stores. The whole thing would just stop if we had that kind of data problems." So, what we built this thing called SAM, a synchronization authority mapping system, and that's helped a lot. And now we're gonna start building something called the Intelligent Multi-Database Analytical System. This will be machine learning AI, right, where we'll be looking at all public-facing databases, right, whether they are private organizations, privately owned or publicly owned, or some organizations are somewhere in between, but databases that are used to facilitate the transfer of revenue for music. Okay, this person owns that, and it's in this database, and this is how. And looking at globally all the different databases, like I mentioned, PROs, performance rights organizations. There's somewhere around 260 of them globally, right? And that's only one side of it. There's also the CMOs, which represent the recording, the mechanical, as it's called. And then there's also all these other databases. And the problem is, as I said, is that from one database to another, you have indiscrepancies, you have non-consistencies, you have errors. So our system is what we are going to be building, and it's going to be a big build. It's a huge mountain to climb. We'll look at all the databases. We'll correlate all the data sets that are in those databases. We'll report that to the copyright owners, the people that actually are the owners of those IP, the intellectual property, and say to them, okay, in all these databases, 60% of them say this is consistent. We have 5% that has this consistent data. We have these other ones that have 2 and 1 and 15%. This is what we found. What's right? Oh, that one's right. Okay, the one that has 1% of all the databases, that's the correct data. Okay, fix it in all the other ones. Right? Fix it across the whole globally across it. And that's for the sellers, the copyright owners, and for the buyers, it will let them see, okay, this is the most consistent information. That's where I could start. But I can see this information is dated a lot sooner than that information. This is 3 months ago. This is 18 months ago. Right? So the buyers, the music supervisors, they won't be able to change the data. But in time, all the data, the idea is that all the data globally gets cleaned and it's consistent so that so there's no more black boxes. This is the idea. Get rid of this money that's sitting there, right? Pay it to the rightful owners, right? This is the idea. And there is a fair bit of pushback on that. And why is there pushback? It sounds like a great thing, good for humanity, good for everybody, because people make a lot of money out of black boxes. A lot of
Yeah.
money. Like it's a huge thing. If you're a PRO and you get to every year park $400-500 million or pounds into a bank account to hold on to it for 3 to 5 years, that's a pretty cool thing. Right? You get the interest on it, you get all of that, you get the leverage of
Yep.
that. We got that much money in the bank. We can leverage it to something else. And then at the end of the 3 to 5 years, you get to decide what to do with it. That gives you a lot of power. Right? That gives you a lot of power in the industry.
How
And
how long do you
taking
think
that
it'll?
away.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No. And you can finish your thought, but I'm curious how long you think it'll take to tackle this problem. It seems like a big problem to tackle. You mentioned a big mountain to climb. Are you saying, okay, in 5 years we will be the source of truth and have made major progress towards this, or is it longer than that, or you don't think about it in that even in those terms?
Yeah, it is going to take quite a bit, but it's like a snowball rolling down a mountain, right? The bigger it gets, the faster it moves, right? So the idea is we already have some databases that are already signing up for this, right? That they are willing to give us access to their data, and with the WIPO behind us, now this is not finalized. I'm still having meetings with them, so okay, it's not a finalized relationship. But if they get behind us, then that will give us more door opening power. But the more organizations that are with us on it, then the more other organizations will need to be.
Hmm.
So these guys are doing it. Why aren't you doing it? You represent me. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you part of this? Right? I want my data to be clean globally. Why don't you do that? Right? And that sort of pressure, we hope, and eventually becomes a thing of, okay, we give a stamp. Right? When we start, all the databases that come with us will get a stamp of approval. Right?
Yeah.
And then we hope that becomes a recognition for people going, well, these guys don't have that stamp, so I'm not going to deal with them. I'm going to go to a PRO that has that stamp.
Yeah.
And we're hoping those sort of things, but it could take a decade. It could take a couple of years. It's hard to say. I think there's going to be quite a bit of pushback, and I think I'm going to be in different meetings and arguing the point.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a big goal. It's a lofty goal, but it's a noble cause, right? So I think that drives you forward. And I think at the beginning of our conversation, though, so I understand that's kind of the North Star of where you're going. Yeah, you did mention that you have specific philosophies on how to run and build a business. So maybe we can shift to that, right? Because
Okay.
you have that goal, but you need the structure, the people, the culture, the philosophy behind you to make it happen. So can you speak to that a bit, or is there a way to concisely talk about your business philosophy?
Okay. Concisely is a good point. So I believe that there's a guy named Ray Dalio who runs Bridgewater in Investments.
Hmm.
And this is what's my philosophy. This is his philosophy. It's called radical transparency and radical honesty. And when I read his book and I read those words and how he does it, I just loved it. And it's something I've done previously in other businesses, but I didn't really put that stamp on it. So what it is everything the company's doing, everybody has access to. There's no secrets. From my level, I'm the CEO, down to whatever level in the company you are at, right? Everybody has access to everybody, right? Whatever I'm doing, you can voice about it, right? So before any actions are taken, before any movements are taken in the company, whether it's developing a new side of the thing or it's a public-facing announcement or working with some other people, it's on the table for everybody, and not everybody has an input, but if they want to, they can. And if they have an input, if they say I don't like it, if it's a negative input, they have to justify it. They have to say why they think it's a bad idea, right? And if that holds water, if that does okay, well, okay, let's look at that. Let's open that up. What does everybody else think of his idea against my idea? And if it goes to his idea, okay, that's what we do. right?
Hmm.
And there's a story, and this is a true story, and it's just a funny, simple thing. There's a truck. It's going under an overpass, and it gets stuck. The truck's too big for the overpass. The fire department, the truck people come, and the bridge to the city engineering department come, and they're discussing whether or not to take the truck apart or take the bridge apart, right? To get the truck out, right? The truck's really stuck under there. This little kid comes along and says, "Why don't you just let the air out of the tires?" Right? Right?
Hmm.
Right? And
Hmm.
that is the philosophy. Sometimes the outside perspective is the clearest. Sometimes when you get your head inside it, you don't get the clearest perspective. So that's one side of it. Right? And the other side is integrity, honesty, without fear is very, very important for a healthy company. As soon as you have a company where I'm the boss and I'm going to tell you what to do, and if you question me, then I'm going to get rid of you. I don't think companies like that last. I don't think they. I think they stumble and fall along, and other companies come up and overtake them and do a lot better than them, right? And and who wants to be that guy? I don't want to be that guy. So it's a matter of we are very slow at bringing new people into the company. The first thing we do is one of us will interview the person, just as not talking about the work, but just who they are, and then we'll have a whole thing open to everybody in the company. We can all talk to them, right?
Hmm.
And we all just have a chat and just to get to know what type of a person is this, and that's a big thing, right? And it's not conformity to our philosophy, it's actually diversity of perspective, right? This is what's very interesting, to have somebody that's not just going to come along and do what we could have done without them. What's the point of that? Okay, an extra set of hands does help, but it's much better if they bring something else to the table of a diversity of perspective. um, I'm a big supporter of diversity in gender, in race, in sexual orientation, all of that. But I also, and this is a bit controversial, I don't care. I really don't care what color your skin is, what your genitalia looks like, right, or what you like to do behind closed doors. I really don't care. It's none of my business unless you want to. I'm a friend and you want to sort of talk about it with me, right? That's totally irrelevant to me. Right, so I will not hire somebody because of the color of their skin, their gender, or their sexual orientation, but I will also not disconsider somebody because of that. Right? It's who
Hmm.
they are. It's actually who they are, and so this is. If you don't have diversity of perspective, then how can you move forward? That's my thinking.
Yeah, it's a good point. And how has it worked at SyncLodge? Would you say that you've put those principles into practice in a meaningful way?
Well, sometimes it's kind of scary, right? Sometimes I get my ass kicked. I think it's a great idea, and I get my ass seriously kicked over it, and that's kind of like the ego gets a little dented. But as far as logic of moving forward, of steps of what we're doing in the industry, why we're doing this, and how we're going to do this, is the clearest way for us to move forward. It really is. There's nobody that's saying yes, I like that, just because they're afraid of losing their job. Right? It's
Yeah.
actually the opposite with us. If somebody's just saying yes, I like that to everything, I go, what's wrong with you? Don't you have an opinion? Come on, come on, shake it up a little bit, right? I'm sure there's something
Yeah.
you don't like about that.
Yeah. No, I think they're really good points. Definitely against the grain. I think I mentioned earlier that my audience, or I try to put content out for entrepreneurs or other founders. Can you think back maybe to the early stages of the company and what you learned during those stages, right as you're getting started? What was most important, or what was the biggest mistake you made for others out there that they may be able to glean something from that?
Right. Well, I have had a few companies, right? And the very first real company that I had in my early 20s, the mistake I didn't understand about the value of the company and how to actually sell it. I got to a point where I didn't want to do it anymore. I closed the company. And that was a big mistake. And then along the time, I've learned that one of the things to really, really be careful about, and I've touched on this a little earlier, is who you're working with. Choose your team, especially your partners, very carefully. And don't, there's this, it's very attractive to meet somebody and be looking, wanting to have a partner, wanting to have somebody do this project with you, do this business with you, and this person is interested, and so you don't dig in deep into the dark corners to really pull out what could be a problem in the future, because you just want somebody to be your partner, you just want somebody on your team to come along with this thing with you. And it's kind of like meeting somebody, and just because they're the opposite or the gender that you like, that you're going to decide you're going to marry them. Right? You run into problems that way. One of the things I learned is to really sit down at first before you sign any deals, before you agree to anything, and really understand who that person is, and put on the table what you want to do, why you want to do it, and see how they react to it. And if they have any objections or think something's naive or think something won't work, then talk that through. Maybe they're right, maybe it's good for you, but maybe it's just a bad match. And don't go into it with the hope that, okay, if I could find somebody, I don't want to work alone. If I could just find somebody with these skills, then that would be good enough for me. That I find to be a really big mistake. And there's have been recently, I won't name the company, but recently there was a big company in the music industry that had huge amounts of money put into it, but it was based, the three people that started it had that problem. They didn't really understand what each other's motives were, what their vision was, and they disagreed, and so the whole thing fell apart. Right? And it could be hell. It's more intense than being married to somebody, being in partnership with somebody. Right?
Yeah.
It could be hell. Right? And then understand that there are going to be bumps in the road. There is always going to be. Nobody's climbed a mountain easily. Right? There's always going to be difficulty. Right? And how the strength of your team signifies how easily you can deal with those things. If you really all going, yes, that's the part of the mountain we're going to, and maybe we take this trail, maybe we take that trail, maybe we go around the other side and come up, but we're going to get up here. That's where we're going, right? Then that's the way you can work through it. If you say no, we're going to that mountain, no, we're going to that mountain, then you're never going to get anywhere. And a lot of teams I've seen doing that, and where there's arguments over fundamental things that one person thinks is obvious, and another person just doesn't agree with it.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, is setting those expectations. I think you talked about earlier about preparation and then executing upon that, and I think a lot of that goes into due diligence and doing the preparation. I mean, when it's choosing a partner, you still need to do that research and that preparation before making a decision, right? So,
and really sit down with them, right? And sit down with, if the person has a partner, right? If they're married in some way, right? Sit down with those people too. Get to know them on a personal level. Get to know who they are, because if you do this, very few companies within a year and a half, 2 years exit, right? Or get bought out, or whatever the situation is. Right? It's usually 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, right? That's a long time to be out, to be really connected at the hip, as they say, with somebody else. And maybe there's a few of you, right? And really make sure, like the partners, the first two people I brought into SyncLodge, I got to know them before I even talked to them about, will you do this with me? Right? I got to know them. There was a certain element of what I was going to do, but it wasn't a question. I wasn't asking them to do it with me yet. Right? This is what I'm doing. I'm thinking about doing this company, right? But really getting to know them, and there's a whole sort of, there's a saying. It's a funny saying. I've always thought this was a funny saying since I was a kid. There's a saying: never look a gift horse in the mouth. Have you heard that one?
I have. Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact meaning, but
yeah, never look a gift horse in the mouth. And the reason they say that is because the horse is a gift, and if you look at a horse's mouth, its teeth, if they're rotted, the horse is very sick. And you can tell how healthy a horse is by its teeth, by its mouth. Okay, so it's a gift and it's a horse. Right? Don't look it in the mouth, because you might see that it has problems. I would rather look at a horse's mouth before I accept it as a gift, right?
Yep.
Because somebody might be just off-burdening their problems onto me. Right? I'm the first person. Let's see inside that horse's mouth, and let's see what it's like, right? And let's see down its throat. Let's see what's really going on in there before I actually accept it as a part of my world.
100%. I think that's
Yeah.
a really good point. I think maybe we can almost end on that. But as we round out here, I will give you the floor. Any other final thoughts? And please, where could people find you, SyncLodge, and learn about all the great things you're doing?
Okay. So, one of the things, and this has been said many times, but I really believe this, and I believe this for most of my life. It's got very little to do with the riches or the accolades that you accumulate during your lifetime. It's actually the effect that you have in the world and the things that you do that you feel good about. We're all going to end up on that last day. And let's hope that on that last day you go, geez, that was a great one, right? That was really
Mm-hmm.
good, right? We're all going to have things that we wish we did a little differently, all that. But overall, make sure you're doing things for the right reasons, and make sure that you can be proud of yourself 20 years down the road. That is, I think, is a big thing. The temptations are there. There's, you can cut corners, you can do this, you do that, and it's not right. But 20 years down the road, it's going to be a shameful thing that's going to hang over you. Right? So watch out for that sort of thing. Um, as far as finding me, apparently I'm the only Lionel Lodge on the internet, which is a pretty cool thing to say.
Yeah.
Right, and so I'm on LinkedIn, and that's the best place to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook, but I keep that mainly for just friends and family. I just keep that on the personal side. Right, but always open to discussing if anybody's working in the music industry and they are wanting to. I'm always happy to, if I have the time, to share, to discuss what's going on with them, and maybe I can help them out in some ways. And the other thing is, we are just a bit of a plug for the company. We have just started in the middle of November a new investment round. So if somebody wants to invest in SyncLodge, it's an exciting ride, and we're going to change the world in many ways. And just talk to me, and we can send you all the details.
All right, Lionel, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you're a busy
Thank you,
man.
Con.
Everything you mentioned, your LinkedIn, your website will be linked in the description for people to find it easily. Again, appreciate
Great.
the time. I learned a lot. Before we started
Oh,
recording, I mentioned, I'm a novice when it comes to the music industry. And so I love, digging into it a little bit and understanding the challenges that it faces. So best of luck. I know you have a noble
thank
cause with
you.
Sync Lodge, and I think you'll do
Well,
great things.
thank you, Connor. I appreciate it. And thanks for